What if death was never the end, only a long, restless sleep? Tonight, we descend into forgotten tombs, cursed rituals, and ancient graves where the dead refuse to stay silent. These classic horror films awaken mummies, spirits, and undead beings bound by old magic and darker promises. Listen closely. Some legends were never meant to be disturbed. If you love atmospheric horror and timeless nightmares, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next journey into the shadows of classic horror. 1. The Mummy, 1959. When ancient love refuses to die. Even the grave becomes a doorway. Would you dare wake what has been buried for centuries? Long before jump scares and fast cuts, The Mummy, 1959, invites you to sit beside a flickering torch and listen to a forbidden story whispered across thousands of years. This is not a tale that rushes toward terror. It creeps, patiently, like sand slipping back into a tomb that should have stayed sealed. From the moment the scroll of life is disturbed, you can feel it. Something old has opened its eyes again. And it remembers everything. The resurrected Karis is not merely a monster wrapped in bandages. He is grief given flesh, devotion twisted into an unholy purpose. Every slow step he takes feels heavy with centuries of waiting, as if time itself bends around his broken body. Hammer Studios understood something timeless here. True horror does not scream. It mourns, it aches, it follows you home in silence. As the story unfolds, the Egyptian desert becomes more than a backdrop. It feels like a living witness, watching humans repeat the same mistake they always do, believing knowledge gives them power over the dead. You may find yourself wondering, would I have done any different? Faced with an ancient tomb and the promise of discovery, would curiosity win over caution? What makes The Mummy, 1959, linger is its tragic heartbeat. Karis is driven by love, loyalty, and ritual, not rage. Each resurrection feels less like a victory and more like a curse renewed. The priests who command him speak of sacred duty, but you can sense the cost. How many times can a soul be dragged back before it forgets what peace feels like? As you watch, pay attention to how the film lets silence breathe. Long pauses, slow movements, and shadowed hallways invite your imagination to do the real work. This is horror that trusts you to lean in, not look away. It asks you to feel the weight of eternity pressing down on a single, shattered being. So let me ask you, do you see Karis as a villain? Or as a victim trapped by ancient faith? And if love could bring someone back from the dead, should it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Some curses are only broken when they're spoken aloud. 2. The Mummy's Shroud, 1967. One careless ritual, one forgotten tomb, and suddenly the dead are no longer content to sleep. Would you recognize the moment a curse truly begins? There's something especially cruel about The Mummy's Shroud. This is not a resurrection born of love or grief, but of arrogance, the quiet confidence of explorers who believe the ancient world has nothing left to teach them. From the opening moments, the film feels like a warning told too late, as if history itself is clearing its throat before speaking. The curse does not arrive with thunder. It arrives patiently. The tomb is opened, the shroud is disturbed, and a ritual meant to protect the dead becomes the key that releases them. Karis rises again, wrapped not just in linen, but in purpose. This time, he is not wandering, he is sent, and that makes every step feel deliberate, inevitable, like fate walking toward you in the dark. What lingers most is the sense of ritual controlling flesh. The shroud is no mere burial cloth, it is a command. A sentence passed down through generations of priests. When Karis moves, it feels less like a creature acting on instinct and more like a spell being recited through muscle and bone. Have you ever felt trapped by a promise made long before you were born? This film understands that feeling all too well. The setting shifts between dusty English estates and memories of ancient Egypt, and the contrast only deepens the horror. Civilization, with all its comfort and certainty, proves powerless against something that has waited thousands of years for obedience. The undead does not need to rush. Time is already on its side. There is a strange melancholy beneath the terror. Karis is not cruel by choice. He is obedience incarnate, a body animated by sacred words he cannot refuse. Each victim is not simply killed, they are claimed as part of a ritual that refuses to end. Watching him, you may find yourself wondering who the real monster is, the mummy, or the belief system that keeps dragging him back into suffering. Unlike louder horror films, The Mummy's Shroud thrives on anticipation. Shadows stretch longer than expected. Silence hangs just a second too long. You begin to listen for footsteps that may never come, or may already be behind you. This is horror that respects patience, trusting dread to grow on its own. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If an ancient law demanded blood in exchange for balance, would you break it, or obey? Knowing the cost? Tell me what you think. Sometimes the most terrifying curses are the ones people choose to keep alive. 3. The Tomb of Ligeia, 1964. When love refuses to loosen its grip on the living. Can death truly claim what it was promised, or does something ancient remain awake, watching you? The Tomb of Ligeia feels like a story told at twilight, when reason begins to blur and emotion takes the lead. From the very first moments, the film wraps itself around you like a half-remembered dream, one where grief whispers louder than logic. This is not a tale about resurrection through ritual alone, but about obsession so powerful it seeps beyond the grave. Ligeia herself is never fully gone. Even in death, her presence lingers in candlelight, in long corridors, in the uneasy pauses between words. Her husband moves through life as though he's still being watched, haunted not by a corpse, but by a will that refuses to surrender. Have you ever felt someone's absence so strongly it felt like a presence? This film understands that quiet terror perfectly. What makes the horror here so intimate is its uncertainty. Is Ligeia truly returning, defying death through sheer force of desire? Or is the mind, broken by love and loss, creating its own undead nightmare? The film never rushes to answer, and that hesitation becomes its sharpest weapon. You're invited to doubt what you see, to question every shadow and every lingering glance. The ancient abbey, crumbling and isolated, feels less like a setting and more like a participant. Stones seem to remember, walls seem to listen. It's as if the past itself is leaning forward, curious to see how far grief will go before it transforms into something darker. As the story unfolds, love begins to feel less romantic and more dangerous, a force capable of erasing boundaries between life and death. There is something unsettlingly seductive about Ligeia's persistence. She does not claw her way back from the grave. She waits, she watches. Her power lies in patience, in certainty, in the belief that love grants permission to return. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If someone loved you enough to refuse death itself, would that be devotion, or a curse? The film's slow, hypnotic pacing allows dread to bloom naturally. Silence becomes heavy. Eye contact feels loaded with meaning. You start to sense that the true horror isn't the supernatural, it's the inability to let go. The undead here is not rotting flesh, but an emotion that refuses to die. So tell me, do you believe Ligeia truly conquered death, or was the real monster born inside the living? Is eternal love beautiful, or terrifying? Share your thoughts below. Some graves are sealed with stone, others with memory. 4. The Asphyx, 1972. What if the secret to eternal life wasn't magic or faith, but a mistake that should never be corrected? Would you still want to live forever if death was watching you learn? The Asphyx begins like a quiet confession, spoken too late. There is no ancient tomb to disturb, no sacred scroll to unroll. Instead, the horror is born in a Victorian drawing room, where curiosity wears the mask of science and certainty feels dangerously earned. From the very start, the film whispers a chilling idea. Death may not be the enemy, it may be the balance. The Asphyx itself is not a creature you can fight. It is a presence, a shadow that appears at the precise moment of death, silently recording the soul's departure. When this moment is captured, controlled, delayed, something fundamental breaks. Watching this unfold feels like overhearing a forbidden truth, one that makes you instinctively uneasy. Have you ever sensed that some knowledge isn't meant to be owned? What makes the resurrection here so disturbing is its cold logic. This isn't desperation or grief driving the experiment, it's confidence. The belief that immortality can be measured, studied, perfected. As lives are extended unnaturally, you begin to feel the weight of time stretching. warping the human spirit. Living longer doesn't bring peace. It brings detachment. It brings cruelty disguised as progress. The undead in the Asphyx are not rotting corpses rising from graves. They are people who should have died, and didn't. Their existence feels wrong in a subtler, more disturbing way. Faces grow distant. Morality erodes. Love becomes a variable rather than a bond. The horror sneaks up on you as you realize that death, once denied, returns in far worse forms. The Victorian setting amplifies the dread. Gas lamps flicker like nervous thoughts. Long hallways feel endless. Time slows until every second feels examined, dissected, weighed for usefulness. The film's pacing dares you to stay with it, to sit in the discomfort and ask yourself the question it keeps circling. What is a life worth without an ending? There's a quiet tragedy beneath the science. The desire to protect loved ones from death slowly transforms into something monstrous. Watching characters cross moral lines, you may find yourself sympathizing and then recoiling. That emotional shift is deliberate. It forces you to confront your own fears. Would you choose immortality for yourself? For someone you love? The Asphyx lingers long after it ends because it reframes resurrection as a punishment, not a gift. The ancient curse here isn't written in stone, it's written in human ambition. And that makes it far more unsettling. So tell me, is death a flaw to be corrected, or a boundary that gives life meaning? If you could stop it, would you? Share your thoughts below. Some doors, once opened, never truly close. 5. The Oblong Box, 1969, a locked coffin, a hidden face, and a secret that refuses to stay buried. Would you open the box if you knew it might still be alive inside? The Oblong Box feels like a whispered rumor passed down through generations. The kind that makes you lean closer even as it unsettles you. From the moment that strange, sealed coffin appears, you sense that this is not a story about simple death, but about what happens when shame, guilt, and ancient vengeance intertwine. The box itself becomes a symbol, not of burial, but of denial. Set against a colonial backdrop soaked in heat and unease, the film drips with the atmosphere of a past that refuses to be forgotten. There is an unspoken understanding that something terrible has already happened long before the story begins. As you watch, you're not waiting for horror to arrive, you're waiting for it to escape. And deep down, you know it will. The undead presence here is not a single creature shambling through the night. It is an idea, a curse rooted in injustice and sealed away rather than confronted. The figure bound to the box feels less like a monster and more like a consequence. Dragged back into the world by secrets that rot when left untouched. Have you ever noticed how buried truths tend to surface in the ugliest ways? What makes the Oblong Box especially haunting is its slow-burning sense of moral decay. Respectable faces hide unforgivable acts. Civilization masks brutality. The resurrection at the heart of this film isn't driven by love or ritual, but by refusal. Refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. Refusal to face the dead. And in horror, refusal is often the most dangerous choice of all. As violence begins to seep into the narrative, it feels inevitable rather than shocking. Each act seems guided by something older than the characters themselves, as if history is correcting itself through blood and fear. The line between victim and villain blurs, leaving you uneasy about where your sympathy truly lies. Is vengeance ever justified when it rises from the grave? The film's pacing allows dread to coil slowly around you. Night scenes feel thick and suffocating. Silence presses in, broken only by screams that feel overdue. You may find yourself questioning not who will survive, but who deserves to. That moral discomfort is intentional. It keeps the story alive in your mind long after the screen fades to black. At its core, the Oblong Box suggests that the undead are not always animated by magic. Sometimes they are animated by memory, by injustice, by pain that was never allowed to rest. The box was meant to contain the past. Instead, it preserved it. So let me ask you, is it better to seal away a terrible truth, or to face it and risk everything? When the dead return for justice, do they become monsters or mirrors? Share your thoughts in the comments. Some boxes are locked for a reason, but some are opened because they must be. 6. The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, 1964. One wrong turn beneath the desert sands. One stolen relic, and suddenly the past is hunting you. Would you know when you've crossed the line that should never be crossed? There's a special kind of dread that comes from realizing you were warned, and ignored it anyway. The curse of the mummy's tomb carries that feeling from its first uneasy moments. This is a story where curiosity walks hand in hand with punishment. And ancient guardians are far more patient than the living who disturb them. You don't feel chased at first. You feel marked. The resurrection here is not dramatic or triumphant. It feels procedural, almost ceremonial, as if the dead have rehearsed this moment for centuries. When the mummy rises, it's not out of rage, but duty. That subtle difference changes everything. You're not watching a creature lash out blindly. You're watching an ancient sentence being carried out. Step by deliberate step. What truly unsettles is the idea that the curse doesn't begin with the undead. It begins with theft, an artifact removed, a tomb violated, history stripped of its context and turned into property. The film quietly asks a dangerous question. Who is the real intruder here? The living explorers, or the dead guardian defending sacred ground? The desert setting amplifies the isolation. Vast, empty landscapes give the impression that civilization is very far away, and perhaps not welcome. Night falls quickly, shadows stretch unnaturally long, and every footstep feels exposed. When death finally arrives, it feels inevitable, like gravity reclaiming balance. Have you ever felt that moment when a mistake becomes irreversible? Unlike louder horror films, this one lets dread build through anticipation. The Mummy does not rush. It advances with the certainty of time itself. Watching it move, you may find yourself holding your breath, knowing escape isn't just unlikely, it's irrelevant. Once the curse is set in motion, distance and reason mean nothing. There's also a quiet sadness beneath the terror. The Mummy is bound to a role it did not choose, animated by ancient laws that refuse to fade. Every act of violence feels less like cruelty and more like obligation. The undead here is not evil, it is responsibility given flesh. And that raises an uncomfortable thought. What traditions do we obey without ever questioning their cost? As the story unfolds, fear blends with guilt. The audience is forced to confront its own fascination with ancient death. With opening sealed doors simply because we can. The film doesn't condemn curiosity outright, it warns against disrespect. Some knowledge demands humility, not ownership. So here's the question I'll leave you with. When history fights back, do we call it horror or justice? Should ancient dead be left untouched, even if they promise discovery and fame? Share your thoughts below. Some tombs are silent for a reason, and some curses begin the moment we stop listening. 7. The Living Idol, 1957. When an ancient god doesn't rise from the grave, but slips quietly into a living body, how would you know when the transformation begins? The Living Idol opens like a warning wrapped in fascination. There is no thunderous resurrection, no dramatic return from the dead. Instead, something far older chooses a subtler path. It doesn't break free from stone or earth, it moves in. From the very beginning, the film plants an unsettling idea in your mind. What if the ancient undead doesn't need to wake up, because it never truly went to sleep? Set against the ruins and myths of an ancient Mesoamerican civilization, the story breathes with forgotten rituals and half-remembered gods. A modern man begins to experience strange visions, unexplainable urges, and a pull toward a past that is not his, or is it? As these moments accumulate, the film invites you to question identity itself. At what point does influence become possession? What makes this film especially eerie is its quietness. There is no single moment where you can say, this is where it all goes wrong. Instead, the transformation unfolds gradually, like a shadow lengthening at dusk. The ancient deity does not force its way into the world. It waits for recognition, for belief, for permission. Have you ever felt drawn to something you couldn't explain, as if it was calling you by a name you don't remember? The undead presence here is spiritual rather than physical, and that makes it deeply unsettling. The gods will express itself through dreams, compulsions, and instinct. Flesh becomes a vessel, memory becomes a doorway. Watching this slow erosion of self, you may find yourself uneasy not because of what you see, but because of what feels inevitable. The contrast between modern skepticism and ancient faith adds another layer of tension. Science struggles to name what ritual understands instinctively. The past is dismissed as myth, even as it proves disturbingly active. The film gently challenges the arrogance of modern thinking, suggesting that ignoring old beliefs doesn't make them powerless, it makes them patient. There's also a quiet tragedy beneath the horror. The man at the center of the story is not evil, nor is he chosen because of strength. He is vulnerable, and that vulnerability is exactly what allows the ancient force to return. This is resurrection without corpses, immortality without decay, and it feels disturbingly intimate. As the story progresses, you may catch yourself asking a frightening question: if an ancient god could live again through you, would you even notice what you were losing? Or would it feel like becoming whole? So tell me, is possession just another form of resurrection? Are ancient gods ever truly dead? Or are they only waiting for belief to give them breath again? Share your thoughts in the comments. Some idols aren't buried in temples, they're hidden inside us, waiting to be remembered. 8. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, 1971. When an ancient queen's bloodline awakens in the modern world, would you recognize resurrection if it looked like destiny instead of decay? There's something deeply unsettling about Blood from the Mummy's Tomb because it doesn't treat resurrection as a sudden event, it treats it as an inheritance. From the opening moments, the film suggests that the past doesn't always rise screaming from the grave. Sometimes, it is born again, quietly, beautifully, and with terrifying intention. At the center of this story is an ancient Egyptian queen whose will was never truly extinguished. Her body may have been entombed, but her essence feels unfinished, impatient. As fragments of her tomb are uncovered, you begin to sense that the real danger isn't what's been found, it's who has been chosen. The undead here is not rotting flesh, but a consciousness slowly reclaiming the world it once ruled. What makes the film linger in your mind is its intimacy. The resurrection unfolds through blood, memory, and identity. A young woman becomes the focal point, not because she seeks power, but because power recognizes her. Watching her transformation feels uncomfortably personal, as if destiny itself is leaning in and whispering instructions. Have you ever wondered whether your life truly belongs to you, or to something older waiting beneath the surface? Unlike traditional mummy stories driven by guardians and curses, this film frames ancient evil as seductive. The queen's return is elegant, controlled, almost reasonable. Violence feels ceremonial rather than chaotic. Each step toward rebirth carries the weight of history asserting itself, correcting what death interrupted, its horror wrapped in inevitability. The atmosphere is thick with unease. Modern rooms feel invaded by ancient intent. Conversations carry double meanings. Silence becomes charge. You're constantly aware that something unseen is aligning pieces into place. The pacing allows dread to bloom slowly, trusting the viewer to sense where it's heading long before it arrives. There's also a powerful question of agency woven throughout the story. Is the woman at the center becoming possessed, or fulfilled? Is she losing herself, or finally remembering who she was always meant to be? The film refuses to give easy answers, and that ambiguity is its sharpest edge. Resurrection here feels less like violation and more like completion, and that should disturb you. As the ancient queen's influence grows, morality begins to shift. Loyalty, love, even life itself start to feel negotiable in the face of destiny. Watching this unfold, you may find yourself conflicted, horrified by the outcome, yet fascinated by the certainty behind it. Would you resist a past that promised power, purpose, and immortality? Blood from the Mummy's Tomb suggests that some ancient undead don't rise to destroy the world, they rise to reclaim it. And they do so patiently, through bloodlines rather than bandages. So let me ask you, if your blood carried the will of something ancient and powerful, would you fight it, or embrace it? Is resurrection always a curse, or can it be a return to truth? Share your thoughts below. Some tombs don't open outward, they open inward, waiting for the right soul to remember who they were. 9. The Mummy's Hand, 1940, a forgotten tomb. A sacred secret, and a ritual older than fear itself, if immortality had a price. Would you dare to pay it? The Mummy's Hand feels like an old legend spoken beside a campfire, where the flicker of light makes every shadow feel alive. From the moment the tale begins, you sense that this is not simply an adventure into ancient ruins. but an initiation into a secret that has survived centuries by remaining hidden. This film doesn't rush toward terror, it invites you to wander straight into it. At the heart of the story is a myth whispered rather than explained, the Tana leaf. A sacred plant capable of sustaining life beyond death. It sounds almost harmless at first, even hopeful, but the film understands something essential: immortality is never free. Each time the leaf is used, it tightens the grip of an ancient curse, pulling the undead Karis back into the world of the living, one slow step at a time. Karis is not introduced as a force of chaos. He is devotion given form. Every movement feels heavy with purpose, as if centuries of loyalty are weighing him down. Watching him walk, you don't feel chased, you feel approached. The inevitability is far more unsettling. Have you ever known something was coming for you and realized there was nothing left to do but wait? What makes the mummy's hand quietly powerful is its sense of tradition. Ancient priests still guard old laws, still believe the dead must be protected at any cost. To them, Karis is not a monster, but a sacred instrument. This reframing forces the viewer into an uncomfortable position. If you believe in a law deeply enough, does violence become holy? The contrast between modern explorers and ancient belief systems creates constant tension. The living see relics as opportunity, knowledge as possession, the dead see intrusion. As the story unfolds, you begin to feel that the mummy is not invading the modern world invaded first. That reversal lingers in the back of your mind, quietly unsettling your sympathies. The pacing allows atmosphere to do the work. Dim corridors, torchlit walls, and nighttime encounters stretch time until every second feels deliberate. Silence becomes a warning. You start listening for footsteps even before they appear. The horror doesn't shout, it breathes. There's also a tragic undercurrent running through the film. Karis exists only to serve, to protect, to repeat the same ritual endlessly. His resurrection is not triumph, it's imprisonment. And that raises a haunting question: is eternal life a blessing, or the cruelest punishment imaginable? So let me ask you, if ancient knowledge could keep death at bay, should it be buried forever? Or is the real curse humanity's refusal to let the past rest? Share your thoughts below. Some hands are not meant to reach out from history, but once they do, they never let go. 10. The Mummy's Ghost, 1944. What happens when an ancient soul finally reaches the end of its journey, and discovers that even fulfillment can feel like a curse? The Mummy's Ghost doesn't feel like the beginning of a horror story. It feels like the final chapter of a long, tragic sentence. From the first moments, there's a sense that something old is growing tired, not weaker, but heavier, weighed down by centuries of obedience. This time, the undead does not rise to punish intruders. It rises to complete something it was never allowed to finish. Karis returns once more, but there's a noticeable shift in tone. His movements feel slower, more deliberate, as if every step carries memory instead of rage. The ancient priests who guide him speak of destiny, of a return to sacred ground, of restoring what was broken long ago. Yet watching him, you may feel something unexpected: sympathy. How long can a soul serve before service becomes suffering? What sets the Mummy's Ghost apart is its emotional weight. Resurrection here is no longer shocking, it's routine. And that repetition is the horror. The mummy is bound not just by ritual, but by exhaustion. He has been awakened too many times, dragged across eras that were never his, forced to protect beliefs that no longer exist in the same way. Have you ever felt trapped by a purpose that once made sense, but no longer does? The film leans heavily into atmosphere. Swamps replace deserts, mist replaces sand, and the world feels softer, quieter, yet more suffocating. Nature itself seems to be reclaiming the undead, pulling Karis closer to the stillness he has been denied. The setting reinforces the idea that this is not a hunt, but a pilgrimage toward rest. At the heart of the story is the reunion between Karis and the woman he was sworn to protect. But even this moment is bittersweet. Love, once the justification for resurrection, now feels like another chain. The film gently suggests that bringing the dead back for love's sake may not honor them, it may only prolong their torment. Unlike earlier entries, the violence here feels subdued, almost reluctant. Death arrives quietly, without triumph. The undead does not conquer the world, it dissolves back into it. And that ending lingers, because it reframes everything that came before. Was Kharis ever meant to be feared, or pitied? The mummy's ghost closes the cycle of resurrection with a somber question. If the dead finally achieve what they were promised, does the curse end, or does it simply fade from view? Watching the final moments, you may feel an unexpected sense of relief and loss. So let me ask you, is eternal devotion noble, or cruel when it denies rest? If you could resurrect someone you loved, knowing they might never find peace, would you still do it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Some ghosts don't haunt because they're angry, they haunt because they're tired. And no one ever asked them to stop. And just like the mummy's ghost, this journey ends not with a scream, but with a whisper from the past. These films remind us that the undead don't rise out of hatred alone, they rise from love, obsession, and promises made too long ago. Now I'm curious, which of these cursed resurrections stayed with you after the screen went dark? Did any ancient soul feel strangely human? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the past always finds a way to return. And our next story may already be waiting for you.